When a clinic starts a TRT protocol, it's a process of we're throwing a dart at the dartboard and we're trying to hit the ring around the bullseye. The process of refinement is you get a blood test done and then you move it closer to the center and then closer to the center again and so on. You still hit puberty at roughly the same time, but you can see one peaks much higher and one peaks much lower, but it follows the same trajectory. So you still get your testosterone peak at the end of puberty.
I think there's probably a good population of people that have gone to get some TRT and they end up with some type of cookie cutter approach. Yeah. And they're feeling really good maybe, but there's something off, right? So I know you've probably dealt with a lot of that and you've probably fixed a lot of guys in those situations. How does somebody know if they need to reevaluate what they've been doing with whatever company they've been doing it with?
Yeah, unfortunately, that's a very good question because it's something that comes up a lot. I wish it didn't. What I was saying before we started was, what I was saying to Mark was that from a business standpoint, it is much more profitable to have 100 guys on 3 medications than 300 guys on 1 medication in terms of less efforts, less overheads, less dealing with, more potential interactions and so on and so forth. So the more medications a clinic can prescribe to an individual patient, the leaner their model is going to be. The problem is that this is not a sales strategy which should be done with medicine and sick people. This is the strategy that should be done for McDonald's, the burger and the fries and the Coke. So I understand how this happens because a lot of clinics open to make money. They see an opportunity in the market. They want to profit. They're not really primarily interested in helping people. It's a real shame. And it seems to be much more of an issue over here in the States. When I landed in Vegas last year for the Olympia, there was an ad for TRT on the radio, which blew my mind. I was like, how is this a thing? And then the guy who was driving my Uber, he's like, yeah, I'm on TRT. And I was like, in Australia, there's 6 clinics in the whole country. I think there were more TRT clinics in a 10-mile radius of my friend Ali Gilbert's house where I was staying than the entire country of Australia and all of Europe combined. Wow. So yeah, it was a big wake-up call because when I went and spoke at the Olympia, it was almost mind-blowing to some people in the audience talking about, microdosing testosterone injections, doing it more frequently, questioning the use of things like HCG and aromatase inhibitors and stuff that I thought was kind of rudimentary from a few years ago turns out to be, quite important for people to understand, which kind of blew my mind in terms of how big this industry is and how far behind it is at the same time. So the cookie cutter protocols are kind of scary. And what they'll be is that a clinic will just have a set testosterone dose they start people on, and then the fries and the Coke, which is generally the HCG and the anastrozole. And this is something that guys need to be wary of because every TRT protocol needs to be individualized. And I will say that there are definitely templates though. If you take 100 guys and start them all on TRT, you'll find that chunks of them are on the same protocols because they have a lot of things in common. And when a clinic starts a TRT protocol, it's a process of we're throwing a dart at the dartboard and we're trying to hit the ring around the bullseye. If we hit the bullseye in the process, great. But the process of refinement is you get a blood test done and then you move it closer to the center and then closer to the center again and so on. So there's some templatized things that pop up in TRT, but it has to be an individual approach. And the most important thing, I think, for patients to be wary of is that you can basically look at the blood test that you're getting and make sure it's comprehensive. So make sure they're evaluating every system in the body, not just what your testosterone number is. Because ultimately, when we're looking at that blood test, we're not trying to discern, can we sell you testosterone? I'd hope. We're trying to discern, why do you feel like shit? And is your cognitive bias that it's coming from testosterone true? And if it is, can we find that there's something else in the body going on that we can fix and resolve to prevent you needing this treatment? That's what a TRT onboarding process should look like. Problem is that sometimes that's not profitable. It doesn't end in a sale and it takes a while. So good clinics will operate that way.
If you've just started TRT, it is completely normal to feel overwhelmed and confused. There's a lot of new territory to cover, and there is a lot of conflicting information. I wrote TRT 101 so that you can have everything that you need to know in an instruction manual in one place that you can refer back to, that you can have all the questions answered before they even come up. TRT 101 is my best practice approach for TRT from start to finish, and it contains everything that you need to avoid all the challenges and pitfalls that I've seen come up in my clients over the last 5 years. You can check it out via the link below.
It's very important to find someone who is going to give you the personalized treatment that you need. Otherwise, you could end up worse off than before you started. Yeah, there it is.
What are some of the charts that you brought in? Were you going to be a teacher today and take us to school?
Well, so when Andrew came to Silverback, because he presented as well, he was kind enough to take the time to watch my speech. And when he invited me on this podcast, he said, you have to bring the slides. So I brought the slides. So this is
take us through, yeah.
Yeah. So if people want the full speech, you can just search Dave Lee Silverback 2024. It's on, the whole thing's on YouTube. But basically, I'm very interested in the behavioral psychology effects of hormones, both in terms of high testosterone and low testosterone. And I think a good place to start is if we have a look at the graph here. On the vertical axis, we've got the difficulty of life, and then on the horizontal axis, we've got age. So if we go to the next one, this, unless you have a particularly traumatic childhood and things are horrible, but for most people, life should go like this, which is that it's pretty cruisy when you're young. Things start to get difficult as you hit adolescence. Life kind of, peaks in difficulty when you get to 30s, 40s, 50s, depending on your trajectory, because you're trying to develop mastery of something, whether it's mastery of a skill, mastery of self. And then, you develop that skill, you build the castle, you sit on top of the house, and, things get a bit easier as you go on. That's how things, I would hope, look for most people. So if we go to the next one, these are your healthy testosterone levels. So you make none when you're very young, and then you hit puberty and it goes up like a freight train. Your testicles get that signal for the first time and the world changes. And then it very gradually drops off as you get older. So if we go to the next one there, if we plot these two things together, you can see that gap. That's where basically testosterone is buffering towards the challenges of life. So as your levels start to go down, they go down as life gets easier. So this is a pretty good scenario. The problem for my generation and the younger generation growing up is that we didn't really have these healthy testosterone levels, and this can be a problem. So if we go to the next one, I put this one in pink. So if we look at unhealthy testosterone levels versus healthy testosterone levels, the timeline is the same, right? You still hit puberty at roughly the same time, but you can see one peaks much higher and one peaks much lower, but it follows the same trajectory. So you still get your testosterone peak at the end of puberty. It just peaks significantly lower than it did before. And one thing that was very interesting for me, when I went to my 10-year high school reunion in 2019, it's quite a big all-boys school. So they take a big photo of all the year 12s who are graduating at the time. And when I compared the 2019 graduates, my year, which was 2009, versus 1999 and 1989, we're looking at 17-year-olds a decade apart. And if you had a fight with the 1989 guys versus the 2019 guys, it would not have even been close. It was like looking at full-grown adults versus children.
I got to find something. Yes, I agree.
And we all know it's true. I mean, if you look out in the street, you can see it. So if you go to the next one here, this is the scenario that my generation is dealing with, is that gap between the testosterone levels and the challenge of life is a lot smaller, and you spend a lot more time with the challenge of life being overwhelming relative to the testosterone levels. And testosterone doesn't make life free or easy. It's not like winning the lottery, but it buffers the stress and it gives you the skill set to be able to handle challenge, push outside your comfort zone, and ultimately overcome. So if we just go to the next one where I've kind of plumped them all together, you can see there's a pretty drastic difference in that gap.
Right.
And if we just transition to the next one there, I've kind of said, these are the good times. And then on the next one, bad times. And then if we go to the final slide, we can see that the amount of time that we're in that buffered state is a lot smaller. And then this is the problem, is that guys are getting to 35 and 40 years old and they haven't mastered anything because they've been so stressed and overwhelmed and avoidant their whole life that the trajectory of where they've ended up has been really depressing and disappointing. And then they end up feeling guilty because they think it's because they were lazy. So I think it can be really psychologically quite challenging for people. But ultimately, the proof is in the pudding in terms of guys are getting to this point where they're getting to 35, 40, 45, and they're not proud of what they've built. And I think that can be a big cause of depression and anxiety.
Yeah, that's huge. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's really well put together. How do you train? How do you eat? What are some habits that you've kind of worked on, and what are some things? Because you mentioned when you were young, and you mentioned that you were in a band, but I think you mentioned you were like very thin and stuff like that. So
Yeah, I got into exercise because I wanted to look good on stage, but also mainly because I was singing and I was getting out of breath. So I had to learn how to improve my cardiovascular
that's something
system.
you never think about. But whenever I see a performance, I'm always like, how is this guy? He's playing the guitar too, and he's like running around the stage. You're like, how the hell he's doing all this?
Well, I was doing the screaming vocals, so like that's basically like using your lungs as bagpipes. And yeah, I got into swimming and high intensity interval training on the elliptical and the rowing machine, and that did wonders for me. Oh, and Tabatas as well. Tabatas were great.
Smart thing to do, especially swimming.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was all well and good, and then I decided I wanted to get huge like everyone else does, and I just benched because the guy who I was training with, and an absolutely lovely guy, he was a friend from school, but he was a rower, so he always wanted to train chest because his back was like a Christmas tree. So I was benching 100 kilos before I even learned how to squat, and I was squatting 3 plates before I learned how to stretch. And then that all came to a mess in my mid-20s with a bunch of spinal injuries. So these days now, I've done a lot of my programming from a company called Muscle Nerds, which is run by Luke Lehman, who was quite close with Charles Poliquin. A lot of stuff I see from him really resonates with Ben Patrick, Knees Over Toes guy, who you've done a lot with. That stuff for me was life-changing. So I do a lot of my training now. I like to exercise every day. Is it optimal for muscle growth and hypertrophy? No, I like it because it makes me feel good. So I like doing a little bit every day. So every morning I get up, I go for a run, do a little row on my ergo machine in the basement, and then I do, usually just one set of a full body thing every day, and then some mobility work and go for a big walk. We live in a nice, peaceful town with a lake, so it's nice going for walks, but I like doing a little bit of resistance, a little bit of cardio, and a good amount of walking every single day.
Daily injections are ideal. If you can really frequently administer something with a very long half-life, you can keep your levels super, super stable. And I think that this is the most beneficial way to do TRT. However, how should TRT be administered?